to Connie Martinson Talks Books. I have a novel, but it is as if you walked into each of these people's homes and you're there being I am a camera. My guest is Andre Dubus III. The book is called Dirty Love, and it's published by Norton. Welcome, Andre.
Thank you, Connie. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. And may I say it's even more of a pleasure to read this book.
Oh, thank you so much.
Because each story in here, and even the way you tie it up in the end, like again, and I made a note, John Dos Passos.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
People you've read who meant something to
I
you?
read Dos Passos 40 years ago, 35 years ago, but not lately. So that's, it's interesting. You never really know what's going to influence you creatively and how long something will last. But these lessons can last decades inside you and then pop up like some nocturnal flower.
And the first story about Mark, who thought he had a good life, had he a good wife. And he literally, Mark is a controller.
Yeah.
But that's his job as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I based Mark Welch in the first story on, I think, a composite of many of my friends who, my wife and I have been fortunate to still be together 25 years down the road, and so far so good. But so many marriages that we started out together as couples, they've all fallen apart.
Yeah.
And one of my good friends' wife fell in love with a trainer at the gym and began to cheat on him. And what I found really interesting, Connie, what really inspired it was he couldn't let go of her. For a while, he totally blamed her. And then he began to see that maybe she wasn't such the villain, that it wasn't so simple as, poor me, look what this woman's done to me and to us. He had his own hand. You're right, he was a controller. He brought his work home. He's a project manager. And the job of the project manager is essentially a very controlling one, which is not all bad. But he couldn't leave it at home. Yeah. When he came home, he continued to control people.
And he had a boss who said to him, stop being a pussy.
Yeah.
Your job is not to be their best friend. And the other part I kept saying to myself as I read it, Peggy Lee's Is That All There Is? Do you know the song?
I do.
Yeah, if that's all there is, then let's keep dancing. Because whoever either one will find is going to turn out to be the same.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think one of the things, maybe the central thing I was exploring in this book is just how difficult it is to love another human being well and to allow yourself to be loved well and to maintain it for decades.
Yeah.
I think so many people, and again, I try not to think thematically before I write. I try to find it from the inside out. But I think a lot of people, when they get married, think that, well, I'm a wife, it's a state of being, or I'm a husband, it's a state of being. Yeah. And it's not. It's a job with a job description and a list of tasks.
Yeah, but these people were part of that era that was the trophy wife, the corporate wife, or your husband has to earn such, I want the bigger house.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's quite as prevalent today.
I agree. And I think it's mainly because women are in the workplace and a lot of wives are making more than their husbands, and that's all good. But, I think it's also thrown a lot of confusion into what our roles are as men and women. 40 years ago, it was the man who made the money and the woman was at home. I'm glad that has been obliterated by the feminist movement, but the consequence is we still don't quite know what our roles are, and it's we're still working it out.
But no role stays the same.
What's that?
No role stays the same.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And it is true that even if the woman is making more money than the man in the house, she's still the one who does the dishes.
Yeah.
And takes care of the food.
Now we come to Mala. Poor Mala, who is overweight. All her friends are getting married. I mean, it's like when you're in college and that the year that every time the New York Times came in and you saw who was getting engaged and you weren't. Mala is now working for the bank, and she has not a bad life. She can afford some of the pleasures, and she's got a cat, Edna.
She's got a cat.
And she meets her friend, and he's overweight. He's an engineer, and the women's husbands like him. He can fit in, and the more he's there, the less she is happy.
Yeah, so Marla came, I don't know where she came from, but she showed up, and She was one of these rare women today who is still a virgin sexually at age 29. Somehow missed that train. The only attention she got from men was, hardly at all or cruel. And so then she does find herself with this man, as you say, and she thinks that the hard part of her life is over, that now things are going to get better. And in some ways they do get better, but then they get, as life does, more complicated.
Because she has to play a role.
She has to be the beloved now. She has to be the partner. And what she finds she loses is who she was before, which wasn't all bad.
Yeah.
And she's not sure it's worth it.
Now, you and your wife, couples are friends.
Yeah.
Do you talk much in a group?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We, one of the things that haunts me, though, about couples breaking up, and I'm sure you've seen it too, is you're friends with both of them. You love them both. You've known them for 20, 30 years. And then they break up, and now you're only friends with him, or you're only friends with her.
Yeah.
When you still love them both. It's a weird social, psychological thing that someone gets dumped.
And the one who gets dumped is hurt.
Yeah, the one, is really hurt, and it's unfair.
Yeah.
No.
But in life too, that works. Whether I'm thinking here in Hollywood, if you're on the A list, and then suddenly your picture didn't do that well, you're on the B list. You're invited Sunday night for leftovers.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
I like that. Sunday night for leftovers. I'm going to remember that. It's good.
And yet, I have to say, you have taken a chunk out of America in this book. The people who are in that area of, whether it's Wareham, as you said, I pronounced, and the whole it's a simple looking life, but it is not that simple.
Yeah, I think that if I have this belief, and again, I try not to inject philosophical thoughts into the fiction, but it kind of reflects what I believe. I do believe if you scratch the surface of any human being on the planet right this second, everybody's in trouble. Yeah. Not everyone, thank God, is in huge trouble, but everybody has some kind of trouble all the time. Yeah. And one of the things I think is really immature about American culture is we panic because of that. We think we're supposed to be happy all the time, and especially if we have success. And that doesn't mean we're supposed to be happy. But no, I mean, older cultures that we all come from, seem to understand implicitly that, life is hard. It's full of suffering, and it's full of joy and beauty and respite, but more suffering. And it's just a daily challenge to, life is really a series of challenges you have to take on, whether you want to or not.
In the group, Luke and his wife, who works in the bank, they had made it. They've got the house, they've got the country house, they've got a boat, and everything looks perfect on the surface.
It's interesting you're mentioning their material comforts. This is the first book where I think I've really started to write from the point of view of people from the middle and upper classes, because I grew up blue collar, and all the fiction I've written up until now, except for the Iranian colonel who was very powerful in his culture in House of Sand and Fog, most of my characters have been blue collar and on the outs, but I've gotten to know upper class people in the last 20 years of my life, and I've gotten to know people who are comfortable materially, and they shattered all of the illusions I held and didn't realize I held, which is, God, they're miserable too. or just because you've got a BMW and a pool doesn't mean you're not sad all day and wonder what the hell you're doing on the planet.
Well, but at least, as my mother used to say, if you're sick in the hospital and you have the money, you get the bedpan faster.
Yeah. No, it's a first world problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Whereas Mark ends up in his mother-in-law's apartment.
His mother's apartment.
His mother's apartment.
Well, that was the scene that actually came from my real life in a way with one of my friends, and I couldn't get the image out of my head that here he is sleeping on the couch of the in-law apartment he built for his mother, attached to the house where he raised his kids with his wife. The kids are grown. The wife, who continues to cheat on him with another man, is in the big house. He's sleeping on the couch of the in-law house. And really, there was that sort of tableau that I couldn't get out of my head that I was endlessly curious about.
But you end that story almost like the tiger or the lady. I mean, you don't know which way he's going to go.
Good.
I kept expecting he would have a gun and shoot her.
Really?
Yeah, he cared that much and he was that angry.
Yeah, but towards the end when that other woman comes into the afternoon, I think it, and what happens between them.
Yeah.
she sort of points out to him that he's not the most attractive man emotionally, that he's, a bit of a prick, is what she says.
Yeah.
And he realizes she's right, and he brings that realization back to his wife with maybe the hopes that I can change and maybe she'll invite me back. But I really like stories that don't tie it up too neatly for you. And I like that it's up to the reader to wonder whether she will take him back.
Well, you also have that with Robert and his wife. She's the one, he works as a bartender, but on the side, he writes a little poetry. So she's encouraging him to write. She's not a talker, and he's working as a bartender with these very voluptuous waitresses around, never really playing around too much. But then there's one, Jackie. And the way I felt reading it, it's that time he hears them talking about his wife as saying, she thinks she's better than the rest of us. And he doesn't defend her.
He doesn't defend her, yeah. That's when I knew I had a weak man on my hands.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew that he was a danger to his own self. And then, of course, alcohol gets involved. And then he and Jackie are having sex, and he's cheating on his wife, and she's pregnant with their child. And then, as you know, something really dramatic happens that makes him look at his entire way of being in the world, which is one that's full of delusion and, self-deceit. He's a bit of a blowhard. He talks a lot more about writing poetry than he does write poetry.
And when you have the 4 couplets he does write, it's better stick to bartending.
It was fun writing bad poetry.
Did you ever write poetry, Adam?
No, I've written a couple of romantic love poems to my wife, but they're best left in the drawer.
You must have really been looking for love when you met her.
Yeah, and I didn't know it. Like a lot of people, 57% of the people in this country, I come from a divorced family, and the truth is, as a young person, I didn't trust love at all. I had this image once. I think I saw love as a glass of really hot water, and me as a piece of Alka-Seltzer. And so if you drop me into that, I will dissolve and disappear. I didn't trust love at all.
Yeah.
But then I met this woman that turned that around.
Yeah. Did she encourage your writing?
Oh, totally. She's a dancer. So she, our bond before we had our 3 kids was, and it still is now. Both of us just wanted to get out of bed every day to create something beautiful, if possible. In her case, a dance or a painting. In my case, a scene, a story, a novel, a poem. Not a poem. Yeah. And although I read poetry every day. And it's a big bond between us. I'm really glad. She doesn't write, but she understands the passion and the endurance and all that's involved.
Well, in passion, I haven't mentioned it yet, but the last sort of story in this book, Dirty Love, for which the title comes. The story of Devon, her family, her father Charles, but it's the Uncle Francis whom you love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one started the way so many stories do for me, where I just began to sense 2 characters in a situation, almost like ghosts from a dream. And I sensed an elderly man in his early 80s, and I sensed a girl more like my daughter's age, 17, 18 years old. And I knew they were living together. And so very quickly I find out that Debbie, who's 18, is fleeing an online sexual image that's ruined her reputation. And
it isn't just, she is being used, and it wasn't with love. It was almost like at the Marjorie Morningstar, how do I get out of this room without going to bed with this man?
I was really interested, and I still am actually haunted by what young women have to put up with now. Women have always been objectified, but I think it's even more so now in the age of the internet and the ubiquitousness of pornography, and I'm haunted by it. So, so she's forced to, not forced, she does it willingly, an act of oral sex. In the beginning. And it's filmed by 2 boys, and they post it online.
But by that point, it wasn't willing. They had picked her up at her house. She thought there was going to be just one. And she can see that they're there's no respect from
Yeah.
any of them.
Yeah.
And that's what is the worst part. I mean, it wasn't one-on-one. It wasn't with love. It was Dirty Debbie.
Yeah, and you know, more like a contact sport, which I think is happening far too often now. And of course, you know, Uncle Francis is 81. He's newly widowed. His wife of 43 years has died. He's also a recovering alcoholic, and you know, he witnessed a massacre in Korea. And so he's got his own demons, but he loves his child. And I think that my favorite part of writing that story was feeling how much love he had for her and how much love she had for him, even though they were decades apart.
Yeah. Do me a favor and read this, but what if, about the students.
Oh, sure. How far down you want me to go?
I think it's on the next page. There's a little black mark.
Yeah, this is from Francis's point of view.
Yeah.
But what if the student has no goals? What then? What if his or her only goal is to get through today? Francis had seen so many kids like that over the years, the ones who openly slept on their forearms on their desks, or those who couldn't sit still and would do anything to make their day more interesting. Write cunt eater on the board just before class, flick a pin cap at a slow girl across the room, light up a cigarette 10 minutes before the bell rang. Jimmy Swansea, the way he sat back and blew smoke out his nostrils and stared at Mr. Brandt staring at him. What Francis had wanted to do was march down the aisle and grab Jimmy's throat and jerk him up from his chair. But Jimmy was 6 feet and 180 or 90 pounds, a boy who, like so many of them, was being raised in a neighborhood much like Francis had been raised in too. No fathers, or if they had them, they were bad fathers, drunk or cruel or distant or all three, and mothers who, unlike his own, had given up in some way or another, so that these children sitting before him, too thin or too heavy, poor teeth and bad skin, one or two surprisingly fit looking like Jimmy Swansea, were to him solitary ghosts just drifting from one demand on them to the next. And on his good days, he could usually summon enough compassion for them to at least try to do the right thing.
That says it all. And yet, years later, when he's stopped by a policeman for Francis for speeding, who should it be?
Jimmy Swansea, state trooper.
Yeah. With the
and that's what happens.
Accent.
That's what happens, right?
And still called him Mr. B.
Mr. B. Yeah, he still had the respect. And if you recall in that scene, Francis Brandt was, his wife had been dead for months, and frankly, he was heading off for a relapse. He'd been sober for years, but what's the point? You know, I've got no job, I got no family, I've got nothing. I'm going to go get drunk.
And his relationship with Beth, his wife, was a little bit mother to son, naughty boy time.
Yeah, she was a scolder and a bit of a harsh taskmaster. And, you know, one of the things that surprised me, and again, this is, you know, we've talked about this. This is what I love about writing is the discovery, is that while he both loved and grieved her loss, there was a part of him relieved she wasn't around nagging him all day. Yeah. And he felt, you know, guilty about that.
And here again, I'll just ask you for this paragraph. He would be a new Francis.
Okay.
He comes out at the end of that paragraph.
This is about his sobriety.
He
would be a new Francis, cleaner, healthier, clear of mind and heart, which would make her a new Beth, though it did not. She was always saying something. Don't slouch. You're tall. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't put your dirty clothes in my hamper. You have one of your own, you know. Don't eat so fast. Enjoy your damn food, Francis. Don't look around so much when you're driving, for Christ's sake. You never let the engine warm up enough first. I wish you wouldn't leave the trash cans in front of my gardening tools. Can't you put them somewhere else? Your brother's a big blowhard, Francis. All he ever does is talk about himself, and his son Charlie's a little shit. It makes me glad we never had children.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
We never had...
I didn't realize how bad that was. Poor guy.
Yeah, but, you know, he's such a good man to this niece.
Yeah.
He was the one that Debbie could turn to as a kid.
Yeah.
And she was somehow the one, who was it, Stephen, who threw her down the sand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I guess that's the thing I love about Francis the most is how much he treasures this 18-year-old young woman in his house and how he knows she's got some trouble behind her, and it slowly dawns on him that it's pornographic. but he refuses to judge her. He
Yeah.
will not judge her. He's got his own demons. He's made his own mistakes, and we're all in this together. And even though Debbie's kind of on her own in the end, and we're not quite sure if it's going to go well for her, you do know that she's loved by one
Yeah.
man very well without
Yeah.
any inappropriate anything.
And her father, Charlie, God knows what. I mean, he is such a horrible man, really.
Yeah, I mean, he is a blowhard.
Yeah.
He's a narcissist. He's self-absorbed. He's deeply alcoholic, and he's cheating on his wife, whom he's cruel to. Who he's cruel to. You know, where do these guys come from? I don't know.
But how about Hollis, the one that Debbie meets on the computer? Now, what is this where she goes around the world?
So chat roulette. I'm sure the young crew here knows what that is. It's a weird thing on the internet where you type it in, and you hit a button, and you now are looking at someone who might be in Turkey or Ohio or Paris, and they could be clothed or unclothed. They could be masturbating or drinking. They could just be looking at you, and it's deeply kind of creepy and lonely and weird. And I heard about this in my travels at a college campus, and I thought it had real dramatic possibilities. So yes, every night, I think as a way for Devin to reclaim herself back from having been violated on the internet, she goes on chat roulette, and she won't engage any man looking at her. She won't talk to them. She has the power. She's getting her power back. But she meets a a soldier from Iraq with brain injury, with post-traumatic stress disorder in Texas, and they begin to fall in love over the internet.
Do you trust it?
No, I do not. Well, I like Hollis. I think he means well. You know, he's 27, 26 years old. She's 18. It's a little creepy, but passable. But he seems to be deeply wounded, to have real disability with post-traumatic stress from Iraq. And so the fact that he wants her to come live with him and love him, I don't sense it's going to go well. I think it's more than she can handle.
How do you discuss this, or how do your kids discuss this with you?
Well, my daughter's the one who showed me how to work the internet. She showed me what Facebook really was and all this stuff. And you know, my kids haven't read this book yet because it's brand new. It just came out. But my sons have read my novels, and they've read my memoir about being a brawler and a boxer growing up. And I'm always terrified when my kids read my work, but I'll be particularly terrified to have my daughter read this because. I don't know. I won't be terrified, but there's so much sexuality and heartache and loss, and I don't know. You know, she's 18 now. We're actually now are moving into an adult relationship where we can talk about all this, so I'm actually okay with it.
But are you okay if she presented to you her life something like that?
I am okay because she's not Devin. She's much stronger, has a greater sense of self-esteem, although I think Devin's a pretty strong young woman. No, my daughter's just in the world like all these kids are, and she'll. I mean, she's got the everything. She's got her iPhone sewn into her hand practically, and it's text the whole time.
So, what does this do to the thumbs? They must get very strong.
You know, it's not just the thumbs too. I mean, you know, I'm going to sound like an old dinosaur here. I use Google every day as a writer. It's a beautiful thing. You know, the Arab Spring couldn't have happened without Twitter. You know, there are many important. You know, I have a shut-in brother whose life is on Facebook, which is a good thing. What really haunts me is that too many of us, and it's not just teenagers, it's people our age and older and in between, they're in a trance. I think these things put us in more of a trance than anything else. I don't think they're helping it. Look, the handheld is what I'm talking about. It's bad enough all these laptops at home, but once it became you can have it here. And, you know, we're just years away from having it injected in us. It's all becoming very strange. We're becoming the machine. I am not a fan of these screens we stare at. I think it distracts us, puts us in a trance. I think it's like a crack pipe. I don't own one. I never will. I don't text. I never have. Let that digital train go. I ain't getting on it.
All right. Question. That part of the world you're made like Faulkner did the South.
Oh, thank you.
More stories that you haven't even put in here.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I had a weird thing happen. So, you know, as you know, my father was the great short story writer, Andre Dubus, and he said a lot of his stories in the Merrimack Valley region. But he was from southern Louisiana. And I never wrote about the region where I grew up, and I grew up in the Merrimack Valley, these mill towns on that river. And but funny, it's weird. By having written townie and written directly in nonfiction about that river valley and those mill towns, for the first time, it kind of freed me up to fictionalize that place. And the novel I'm working on now is set there.
Because actually, you do bring that in of the Depression. And I'm seeing his father trying to get on one of those trains that the guys who were out selling apples for a nickel did.
Yeah, you know, the town I lived in, it's Haverhill, Massachusetts, was at one point it was called Queen Slipper City. It produced 90% of the shoe soles in the country. But then the Italians started to export theirs cheaper and better. Anyway, the town went belly up. And when I lived there in the 70s, it was a depressed, semi-abandoned mill town, and that's where I got into all my trouble. But it was interesting for me and really enjoyable to go back and live in that town when it was still sort of functioning at a higher level. But the mills in the Depression all shut down, and you had all these unemployed men. You had bread lines and soup lines at the Young Men's Christian Association, and and so Francis's father hopped a train and left the family. The thought was he was going to go make us some money somewhere, but they never saw him again. There are a lot of absent fathers in this story, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Danny Sullivan is an interesting one who's the manager. And those are the places back east that are good only in the summer. They have a short life. They hire the kids out of college usually. And you're on your own. Yeah,
it's 2.5 months maybe of high tip season, and then everything gets shuttered for the winter, and then it's in these beach towns. And it's really interesting. So it's a carnival for about maybe like 6 to 8 weeks, and then it's boarded up and the snow starts blowing in.
But that's how you have used a theme through this, because Debbie is working at that bar that Robert, who is playing with Jackie in another story, is also the bartender.
Yeah, and Mark Welch from the first story was drunk in that bar, and I enjoyed that. You know what's weird too, though, Connie, is I didn't realize how linked they were until my editor pointed it out to me. She said, they're in the same place, in the same town, and some people work in the same bank, in the same bar. I said, no, I didn't really realize that.
Or Debbie getting involved with Luke, whose mother is working in the bank. And you talk about them going to the party. So that's where I made the note to myself, like Dos Passos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm honored. I appreciate that.
I don't remember you doing that in the other books.
No, I haven't. Most of my novels are multiple point of view narratives, because I love that about the novel as a form, how many people it can hold, how many stories it can hold. But they all have to coalesce around one story. But in this one, I enjoyed having 4 stories go in their own direction, but having one character kind of walk in the front door of one story and out the back door of another. The way we kind of do in life, You see, you see your waitress. She serves you your salad. She goes off and tells her husband that she's leaving him in the back room, and that's her story. But you might be talking to your husband about, a grandkid who's sick, God forbid. So we all have these ongoing stories, and there's always some kind of trouble.
And I was curious why you picked Texas for Hollis, and then I realized you had gone to the university.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I like Texas, and I went to UT Austin years ago, and all my family's from Louisiana. Even though I'm an East Coast kid, north of Boston, I do feel an affinity for the South in some weird kind of genetic way.
How do you handle coming back from there to that eastern part, because the schools are so different?
I enjoyed how different UT Austin was from the Tony little liberal arts colleges in New England. I needed just to walk around with guys with cowboy boots, drinking Lone Star beer, and driving trucks. You'll notice I wear boots too, and I frankly own a truck.
Next book, you're in the middle of it now?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say middle, but I've got both legs in it. It's a novel, and it's got my attention, and that's all I ask for. And I'm grateful it has my attention.
You write in the morning?
I write every morning, longhand pencil, in Mead composition notebooks.
And who does the typing?
Me. So what I'll do is I'll write longhand. I did this morning, and then tomorrow I'll crank up some music, and I'll just type the previous day's handwritten work.
Yeah.
do a little editing on the machine, get rid of the machine, and keep composing longhand.
Andre, I love the book.
Oh, thank you.
It's such, it's interesting too. As brilliant as the others were, this is a growth. This is a different part of you.
Oh, thank you. You know what? It's a relationship book. There's no violence in that. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Possibility, but it isn't there.
Yeah, that's right.
Would you autograph
I'd be
my
honored.
book?
Thank you so much.